All right, guys. Hello, I'm Justin,
And I'm Waylon.
and we're going to talk about not Star Trek. Well, sort of. It's going to get a mention. But today, well, one of the things Waylon, when he decided,
I'm a film guy, so
yeah, he's a film guy, and one of the things he's always tried to do is get me to watch his terrible independent films that I generally hate and shy away from. But for the sake of doing an episode, I agreed to watch one he's been trying to get me to watch for a while. And it would be The Man from Earth. And it was an independent film, I think, done by Falling Sky Productions. I could be wrong.
I think so.
Came out in 2007. The gist of it, real quick, is it all takes place in one room, which is kind of cool. I mean, a little bit takes outside of the house, but it's basically at this guy's house, which is like a small cabin. And he's immortal, basically. He's a caveman
You don't necessarily know that to begin. Spoilers, by the way.
Yeah, spoiler alert. He said what he was, like Cro-Magnon man or something. Basically,
Right.
He was pretty much almost completely like a human being. But he's immortal. He's lived for 14,000 years, and he lives a life for, like 10 years he stated, and then he moves on because he doesn't want people catching on that he's immortal, because I guess he's afraid he'll end up, like killed or, put to a lab and studied. And he's leaving his current life. In his current life, he's a professor. And so all of his professor friends come to his house, and they sit down with him. And he's kind of decides, I'm just going to... And they're all experts. Like, one's a professor of biology. One's like Christian literature or literature art, maybe. One's like a prehistory. One's a history professor. So they're like experts in their field. And he just decides to tell them. And it's just about him telling them that he's immortal and basically how they react to it. So I guess Waylon is waiting for my reaction to the movie.
Right, pretty much. I'm curious to see if you liked it.
Obviously, when I come into these, I come in with the assumption I'm going to hate it, just because I don't like movies that are generally artsy. I don't generally like independent films. Some I do, some I don't know. I don't like weird... I like weird movies, but I don't. Anyways, what I thought of the movie, I liked it. It was worth... I wasn't disappointed. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite movies. I wouldn't call it a cinematic masterpiece, but I don't feel like I wasted an hour and 30 minutes of my life. I thought it was worth watching.
Right. And it's done with a small cast, small scene.
Yeah. And it wasn't too... It wasn't weird. It wasn't like artsy-fartsy, where it was like a straight on movie, and it was interesting, and like interesting points were brought up, and like I said, it's all pretty much done in one room where they're sitting around talking. The actors, they're like C and B list guys. I recognized 3 of the actors. I recognized the guy who plays Dr. Phlox on Star Trek Enterprise. I recognized him. I recognized the black guy who I think was in the original, not the original, the remake of Night of the Living Dead. I've also seen him in a bunch of other stuff that I can't place. And I recognize the old woman from things. I can't place her, but I've seen her before.
What about Richard, really, the one psychiatrist guy? Did you recognize him?
Oh, yeah, I did kind of recognize him. It's like he's another one of those guys that I've seen in things, but I can't place.
You can't place, yeah.
I think maybe he was in an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. I seen... Maybe. Oh, God, there's been so many guest stars. So, yeah, I recognized some of the cast. Like, no A-list, there's no George Clooney's or Johnny Depp's, right. But for, like, an independent film, it's not bad. Not that A-list actors make a movie.
Right.
But
it was a solid list of B actors. And, I liked how they progressed through a philosophical discussion in a room.
And it had
passing around Johnny Walker.
Yes. Yeah, and... Green. You're the alcohol guy. Is Green even like a high level Johnny Walker?
It's...
Because they seemed real impressed by it.
It's close to $100. So, I mean, it's pretty decent. Blue would be the top.
Is Blue out right after Green?
I think Gold is a little above Green. Blue is about $250 a bottle, while green is around the $100.
Okay, so I guess $100 bottle of liquor is pretty fancy.
Yeah,
it is something to be like ooh about.
Yeah.
Let's see other thoughts about the movie. Don't necessarily what to get in. I will get into a couple, but the thing they covered their bases a lot.
Yes. And that's what I liked.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of plot holes where you'd be like, oh, that's a plot hole. And even if they didn't fully explain it, which I'll touch a point on that in a minute, they at least allude to it.
Right.
Okay, well, I guess I'll just go into that. Well, my biggest thing at first was, and this is something they didn't necessarily answer, but I don't think they needed to, and it was, he's immortal, and, I mean, they kind of explain, the biology guy says, well, maybe it's possible if his cells, reproduce and there's no waste. It's like, okay. But I was like, okay, is he just long-lived? Is he susceptible to physical damage? And they touched on a little bit. They talked about, does he get sick? And he was like, yes, I get sick. I've had the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't scar because of his cells reproduce perfectly, but he does get sick. He just gets better. I guess it doesn't kill him. But then, my whole thing is there's no way. There's just no way you're going to live 14,000 years and not die of
falling down a cliff.
Either accident, falling down a cliff, especially when he went thousands of years in prehistoric-ish, early history.
Getting eaten by a tiger.
Yeah, getting eaten by an animal. Just walking on the road in ancient Sumeria and having bandits come up and chop your head off and steal your stuff. It's not gonna happen. But they didn't need to answer. They kind of, because the guy came in, the psychiatrist, and he had the gun. He pointed a gun at his head, and he was like, "What happens if I shoot you in the head?" And he was just like, "I don't know. I'll probably die." So I mean, it's not like they avoided it. They didn't we're not going to touch this. They kind of brought it up, but they didn't say what would happen, which I think is probably the best way to leave it.
Right.
I mean, I would assume that he is immortal. You could blow his head off, and he's somehow going to reform. Just because I don't see how he'd get through. Yeah, I personally don't see how he'd survive 14,000 years and not be have physical damage occur to him. But I like that they kind of left it, because if they did something goofy where they shot his head, I don't know, it would have gone goofy. I think it would have made it less impacting or serious, but.
Yeah, it's not campy in a way.
Right. Yeah, so I don't have a problem with that. Let's see. Anything else? The only other part that I didn't really care for was the reaction of the people in the room with him. I guess that's kind of weird because you're probably expecting something different, maybe. It wasn't realistic. The people in the room, I don't know. Maybe it's just my circle of friends, because I feel like if I got you and Anthony and people together and I was like, I'm 14,000 years old, and
that's a little less believable because we've known you since you were younger. Yeah.
But they said they've known him 10 years and he was always an upstanding, truthful guy. It's just. I don't know why you get mad. Some of them got really mad. Right. And I can understand the lady later with the big reveal, the G reveal that, again, I'll get to in a minute. But it's why did they get so angry? Maybe even if it was a big joke, it wasn't
fun and entertaining.
Yeah, it wasn't it was a cruel joke, except maybe the religious part later. But
right.
I don't get why people got so especially the one guy who was an archaeologist maybe, and he was he's the one that called the psychiatrist because he's going completely off the deep end. But it's is he really? I mean, logically, it's all pointing to just a joke. He's not he wasn't being crazy. It's just I didn't buy their reactions. Even the psychologist guy when he pulled a gun on him, and then they kind of explained that his wife passed away 2 days ago and he's kind of unstable.
Right. The psychologist needs the help the most.
I know. I kind of buy it, but I think that was the weak link in the movie, just people's general reaction. It could have done without them getting angry at him. It could have been like, "Oh, are you joking, man? Are you okay?" But I just thought they got a little bit too emotional with him for no good reason.
I can see that a little bit.
Anything to add to that? Any of my negative points? Because really, those are only the two like negative things I have to say. Other than that, they really covered their bases.
Yeah, and in fact, I kind of agree. Because I knew it was more for story, but add a little drama or whatever. But my biggest thing was the whole philosophy behind it as they interacted with the characters. Sometimes they needed to get a little angry to kind of try to debug his system, but in the same way, they overreacted.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best way. They were overreacting. And it kind of took me out of the movie a little bit, not a ton. I still enjoyed it, but that was my biggest thing. The first criticism I had with the whole physical harm thing, that's not even a criticism because they did address that, and they addressed it the best way I felt they could, which is just leave it kind of open. And even he was like, "Oh, I don't know, I might die, I don't know." But so I guess my only real criticism was the other characters and their reaction to his story, which is pretty good because usually I'll just pick holes in everything like constantly. There's a lot of cool things they brought up, even little things like stuff I was just I've been watching like through the wormhole with Morgan Freeman, and
right.
It's cool episodes, like one about time, and the one guy even brought up the thing about like how does time pass for you, like psychologically, because I guess it's a fact that as we get older, time seems to pass mentally faster for us. So I forget the exact number, but it's like like a day when you're a kid seems way longer than when you're like 60. Like they figured out like time seems to pass like 2.5 times faster when you're 60.
There's so much more on your mind.
Yeah,
it's time so just slips through
things, but it was real interesting because the guy was like, "You're 14,000 years old. Like, how does time pass for you? Like, does centuries just seem like nothing?" And I don't think he really answered it, but they brought it up, which was kind of cool.
Right. They brought up a lot of neat things.
And the thing I liked is they kind of left things open. They didn't over-explain stuff. Like, "Have you ever met anyone that was like you?" And he was like, "Yeah, I think he was like in 16-something. I met this guy in France or something." And he claimed he was like me, and he seemed legitimate. And we talked about it for 2 days, and we said we'd stay in touch. But of course they couldn't, especially not in 16, whatever, if they're traveling around like that. And it was kind of cool because, he kind of like, I don't know, maybe he was like me. I don't know. We had no way really of confirming it.
Right.
Unless, if the physical damage thing worked out, then they would have had a way to confirm it. Just like cut his hand off and see what happens or something, stab him. But
I don't know about cutting the hand off, but.
Right. Stab him in the heart, maybe?
Well, that would kill him. Just get him a cut and see if the scar heals.
Oh, that would be a very plausible way to do it. But anyways, they kind of left it open, which I kind of liked. They just addressed things that needed addressing, and they did it well. Like, "Oh, don't you have an artifact? You've been around 14,000 years," and he was like, "No. Like, how am I? I'm not going to."
You remember your toothbrush from when you were a kid?
Exactly. Like, I'm not going to carry around this stuff for 14,000 years. It's going to get lost. I'm not going to have a reason to carry it around. I mean, and then the old one, she's like, "What were you doing in 1262 or whatever?" And he's like, "Do you remember what you did on this day last year?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It makes sense."
Yeah.
So, I liked it. I guess the big reveal in it was the whole thing which is cool. I don't have a problem with this either. I thought it was really interesting that he's the basis for the whole Jesus mythology. That he went to India
with the Buddha.
Yeah, he studied with the Buddha. He came back. When he came back, the Roman Empire was in control. He didn't like how it was like a war machine, and he wanted to bring some of Buddha's teaching, and it got kind of misinterpreted, and it formed Christianity. And they even the detail, like, well, how did Jesus come about? Did you randomly pick to call yourself Jesus that year or whatever? And he was like, "No, my name was John. I usually always call myself John, and it got in Hebrew it's this, and it got changed to this and this, and over time it became Jesus." And it's like, it's pretty good. It's like it makes sense. It's kind of cool.
And even being crucified, he was able to slow his heart rate to pretend he was dead from the Buddha. So 3 days later, he's healing himself by perfect regeneration and gets up and goes. And so people discovered him. Yeah.
That I'm curious. I meant to research that before we did this, but I forgot to. Because I really wanted to see, like, is that an actual thing? Like, are there really scientifically, like, these Buddhist techniques or monk techniques that you can naturally slow yourself to do? Because it's stuff we always hear about. It's like a ninja can catch an arrow in his hand, and if you don't know anything, you're like, maybe he could. But like, it seems like a Mythbusters episode I'd like to see, like monk myths.
Right, and also, do they really have the medical technology? They left the guy up there for a while. Most of them die. They put him in a cave and sealed him up. He's pretty much dead. I don't know.
That's true.
I can't test to see if he's dead, but you know.
I don't know if they bothered listening to the hearts. I know they were more advanced than we think, but I don't think a guy that's been crucified for 3 days, they're even going to bother to like listen for his heart. They're probably just going to, you're right, they're probably just going to assume he's dead.
Right, yeah.
So I guess if you just kind of use whatever techniques, you know, that are, I'm sure they're reasonable techniques that do make you seem dead. I'm sure, I guess if he did that and they're just kind of like taking him down and throwing him in a hole, that, it will work. So... Yeah, I didn't have... Again, and that might have been one of the only times where one of the characters was really justified in being angry.
Oh, yes, very much.
She was religious, apparently, and it was kind of like destroying her faith.
Yeah, that wasn't an overreaction there. It's like, how dare you? You know?
Yeah, I mean, to her, that's
even
heresy.
as a joke, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they started to overreact. Because so some of it was justified. Maybe they were angry because of that. You know, it's like, you're going a little too far with this, man. You know, step back a little bit. Let us know.
I agree, and that's the part where he kind of like they sort of forced him to say it was a story, but I mean, it was under duress, so it doesn't matter. I mean, it's like it was. I don't know. It's like none of these are dumb people. They're all smart people, and if he's telling this story this whole time, and then it's like. I don't know. It's just, it's not sincere. Because it's just like, oh, this has gone too far. You say it was a story. It's like they're telling him to admit it was a story. And then he thinks about it. And he's like, yeah, I got you. It was a story.
It's like they're actually starting to believe him because it's so realistic to them. It actually makes sense in their head. It's like they're starting to believe him. And then they force him for their own like sanity or good, like, tell us it's a story. Whether we believe you or not. For my sake, tell me it's a story. Yeah, just because I'm going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't have... I liked, at the end, the one guy's leaving, and I even wrote this down in my quotes, that he was like, I'm going to watch Star Trek for a dose of sanity.
Yes.
And it's funny on two levels. One is we did several recordings for episodes that were all about Star Trek.
Right.
So it's kind of...
And there's a Star Trek character.
Yes. And there's a cast from one of the Star Trek series, from Enterprise in the cast. So I actually didn't think about that until like when we started this recording.
Oh, yeah.
I was just thinking it was like a random quote, and I was like, oh, that'll be funny because we just are going to record some Star Trek stuff. And then, but yeah, that's right. The guy was actually Dr. Phlox on Star Trek Enterprise, so there was a Star Trek quote. I mean, I have one more thing, but do you have anything else to say or comments, things you liked about it or anything?
I think you're bringing up exactly what I wanted to say, so yeah, that was good.
Okay.
I think I know the next thing you're going to bring up, so...
I don't think you will.
Oh, okay. Well, surprise me. And if not, I'll bring you something else.
Okay, because this is actually it's a little bit outside of the movie, which I think is interesting. Oh. Actually, I have two things. Well, I'll do one thing first, and it's another negative. It's a criticism I forgot about. It's not a big one though, and it's just that I find it hard to believe that he didn't try to reveal this to anyone else in the last 14,000 years.
And why would he do it now? Yes.
Yeah, it's like random. It's like, okay, I mean, I guess it's believable, but I find it far fetched. Like, why wouldn't he have said this? Even, I mean, you could say the early years he didn't know what was going on. People were very not not very tolerant, but he did go through some ages that were very tolerant. Like, he went through the Renaissance. You know, he went even early 20th century where like science and things were. Or the Victorian,
60s.
Yeah, or the 60s. I just find it surprising he didn't. This is like the first group that he ever like came out to.
Right.
But again, that's a very, very small criticism. Okay, the thing I was going to bring up though, that it's a little bit outside the movie, but it's an interesting point. Well, it is about the movie, but what do you think? Don't you think it's interesting that maybe he did wait to bring it up is because maybe he feels even subconsciously that he can't keep it a secret much longer just because of how society and technology is going. Like, even not social media, everyone has a phone, everyone's phone's a camera. Cities like London or their cameras monitoring everything, street traffic camera. Like he's going to be getting on film and picture if he hasn't in the past a lot more now. And as time goes on and and then you've got the internet, everyone's connected. Someone is going to put pieces together. Like, this guy's in this picture and he's in this picture and they're 100 years apart, or he's here and he's here. And I just find it interesting that maybe that's part of why, he told them, because he knew maybe the jig is going to be up soon, just because unless he becomes like a hermit and he just decides to live in the forest from now on, which still, there's just cameras everywhere. I mean, the odds of people figuring him out are going to start going up and up. And also counting, like the nation state. He talked about that a little bit, how it might have been easier when it was like hunter-gatherers and he could move town to town. And then things became nation states and people became more suspicious of foreigners. But it's like, even at the Social Security, you've got...
birth certificates, everything.
Yeah, he even said that one thing. He was in a Belgian prison in the 1800s or something for fraud for like 10 years. And it's like, it's going to get harder and harder and harder for him.
I mean, just think of internet from 20 years ago to now. It's everywhere. It's in the smallest of towns. High speed. So, yeah, eventually he knows he's going to get discovered. So he doesn't know how much longer he has. So maybe this is his toe in the water, testing it out, see if maybe he hit some people behind him to protect him,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Like that he could come back to.
He's realizing that,
maybe that's also why he brought that girl with him. Although I know that had to do with kind of a love story.
Right.
Which it makes sense. If he's lived 14,000 years, he's had countless lovers and he's had people he's fallen in love with and he has to watch them grow old and die.
And his kids.
And his kids, the one kid, he died,
That's the big one. Like, his kid was actually the psychiatrist.
Yes, spoiler alert. That was the other big reveal.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, this and then he died. Solidifies everything. He actually is that,
And that was the first time that he saw, like, one of his children die.
Yeah. And that's when his story that you weren't quite sure if he was or wasn't became real,
Right.
Is when he's dying.
Yeah, because that confirms it, pretty much.
Before that, you were just a member of the audience, a member of the group, just listening to this guy tell his story. That's what actually made it like, oh, he is the chromatic man, or whatever it's called.
Chromatic man. He's so colorful. But yeah, Cro-Magnum.
Something like
that. I can't get it. We got it close enough. Well, was that the point you thought I was going to bring up?
Yeah, that's the point I thought you were going to do that.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
If you didn't, I was, so.
Huh. Well,
but you did do well with the whole internet thing. I had thought about that too. That I just had that in the back of my mind too. So.
I mean, that's my whole little mini page of notes that I wrote down about it. The cinematography, it was okay. It was passable. Some of the music was cheesy.
And there wasn't a lot of music in it, though.
No, there wasn't. It was mostly like the beginning, like with the credits, and it was a little cheesy.
What about the painting by Van Gogh?
Yeah, that was another. I like how they talked about like he was certain. like historical figures, or he met historical people, but they didn't really overdo it.
Right. Like Forrest Gump or something.
Yeah. He wasn't the Forrest Gump of history. Thank God. and I like how they point, like, I'm just one guy, and it's 14,000 years of history through the point of view of one human being. I can't be everywhere at once. I can only be at one spot at one time.
Right.
I thought that was good that they touched on that too, and that he's not like this accumulation of 14,000 years of knowledge. Like, he only remembers so much, and it's not like he cannot be better than any certain person in the field at any one time. Because he's like, yeah, I have 7 degrees. Yeah, I have 7 degrees. One of them's in biology, but I took it in like the 1800s, so it's a little out of date.
Yeah. So yeah, he's not like this super genius. Like, I can do anything. I'm just a simple man. I travel around and I learn what I can and adapt where I need to.
Yeah. But okay, yeah, cinematography was good. The music was a little cheesy at points. Even some of the cinematography, it seemed like at one point, I remember one part of the movie, it looked like they were trying to do a weird film noir thing where, like, they showed his face close up, like half of his face, and then everyone else was behind him, and I was like, it just didn't work for the movie. It was a cheesy effect. I mean, my overall, it's better than Indifference. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I don't find it to be a masterpiece. I probably wouldn't watch it again unless it was like on TV and it was just there. But I mean, I would recommend it. I thought I did not feel like I was gypped out of an hour and 30 minutes or however long it was.
I'm glad. So
I enjoyed it, and I would probably recommend it to select people. It's not everyone's cup of tea.
No. If you like history and like
and it's not like what I thought maybe at first. Like he's gonna recall memories, and it's gonna be like a blockbuster movie where they're gonna like do flashback scenes and like show him in the 1800s. No, there's none of that. It's just
story.
No, it's just him in the room talking to his colleagues, and it worked. But I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. So, unless you have anything else to add, I think I'm about done.
No, that seems to cover it. That
about covers it. All right. Well, I guess that was our episode on the independent film Man from Earth. I guess that's it. So, thanks for stopping by.
Spy!